There is a story we all know, or at least a story we think we know. It is one of the foundational myths of Western civilization, a simple, powerful parable that has been passed down for millennia, taught to children as a concise lesson in morality. A father, a brilliant inventor, a son, a foolish boy, a pair of wings made of feathers and wax, and a single fatal warning. Don't fly too close to the Sunday. The myth of Icarus. We know it by heart. It is the definitive warning against the dangers of ambition, the catastrophic price of hubris. We're taught that Icarus fell because he was arrogant. He defied his father. He challenged the natural order, and for that, he was punished. It is a comfortable lie. It's a story that is simple, clean, and easy to digest. And it is almost entirely wrong. Welcome to Hindsight Lore. What if the lesson we learn from Icarus is itself a deception? What if the moral of the story is a convenient misinterpretation, designed to mask a much darker, more complex tragedy? Because the story of Icarus is not a simple parable about a boy's arrogance. It is a complex case study about a father's failure. It is not a lesson about the danger of ambition. It is a lesson about the absolute necessity of mentorship. The true tragedy of this myth is not the hubris of Icarus, who flew too high, but the hidden hubris of Daedalus, who never taught him how to fly at all. To find the true lesson, we must first revisit the accepted story. Our story begins not with Icarus, but with his father, Daedalus. Daedalus is not just a man. He is a concept. He is the archetype of the master artisan, the Thomas Edison or Steve Jobs of his era. He is a genius of architecture, sculpture, and invention, living in Athens. But his genius is poisoned by jealousy. The myths tell us he had a nephew, Perdix, who showed signs of rivaling his talent. In a fit of jealous rage, Daedalus murders him. For this crime, he is exiled. He flees to the island of Crete, home of the powerful King Minos. It is here that Daedalus' genius becomes his own prison. King Minos commissions him to build one of history's most infamous structures, the labyrinth, a maze so complex, so perfect in its design, that no one, not even its architect, could escape it. It was built to contain the Minotaur, the monstrous son of Minos' queen. Daedalus succeeds, but in doing so, he becomes a liability. He knows the secret of the labyrinth. King Minos, fearing this knowledge could spread, imprisons Daedalus and his young son, Icarus, within the very tower of the maze he designed. The master artisan is trapped by his own masterpiece. The sea is guarded. The land is impossible. Daedalus, looking up, sees the only path to freedom, the sky. He begins his greatest invention. He gathers feathers, twisting them together with thread. He binds them at their base with beeswax. He meticulously crafts 2 pairs of wings, one for himself and one for his son. The moment of escape arrives. Daedalus straps the wings to Icarus' back, and here he delivers the famous warning. Icarus, he says, you must fly the middle path. Fly to LOW, and the spray from the sea will soak the feathers, weighing you down. Fly to He, and the heat from the sun will melt the wax, and your wings will fall apart. The boy nods. They leap from the tower, and for a moment, it is triumph. They are flying. They have achieved the impossible. They have broken the laws of nature and man. But then, Icarus, overcome by the sheer, overwhelming ecstasy of flight, forgets the warning. He is filled with a desire for the sky. He soars higher and higher, closer to the Sunday. And the inevitable happens. The wax softens, the feathers scatter. Icarus, flailing his bare arms, plunges into the sea and drowns. Daedalus, the father, can only circle above, crying out his son's name. The genius who could build anything could not save the one thing that mattered. This is the story, and this is where we derive the simple moral. Listen to your elders. Know your place. Hubris challenging the gods will lead to your destruction. The story seems complete, a tidy, tragic bow. But the Hindsight Lore, the true uncomfortable wisdom, lies not in the fall, but in the moments before the flight. It lies in a single, devastating question that the myth forces us to ignore. Why did a genius like Daedalus give the keys to a revolutionary, world-changing technology to an inexperienced boy with only a verbal warning? We have been conditioned to see Daedalus as the grieving father. It is a sympathetic portrait. But for this analysis, we must see him through a different lens. We must see him as a leader, a strategist, a teacher. And when we apply that lens, he's a catastrophic failure. Daedalus' failure is twofold. First, he fails to understand the power of his own creation. Second, he fails to understand the psychology of his user. Let's analyze the technology. The wings were not a simple tool. They were, in that world, the equivalent of a nuclear reactor or a godlike artificial intelligence. It was a technology that fundamentally broke the rules of human existence. It offered absolute freedom and absolute risk. Daedalus, the engineer, spent all his time focused on the product. He knew exactly how it worked. He knew its precise tolerances. He understood the physics of the wax and the stress on the feathers. What he did not understand was his son. He handed this world-changing power to a teenager, a boy whose defining characteristic in all mythology is youth, a boy whose brain is not yet fully formed, who is driven by impulse, emotion, and a desperate desire for experience. And what was Daedalus' user manual? What was his training program? A single sentence: don't fly too high, don't fly too low. This is not mentorship. This is a liability waiver. This is the first critical failure of leadership. Daedalus was so obsessed with his invention, he forgot about the user. He is the 21st century Silicon Valley CEO who designs a revolutionary social media algorithm but spends zero time considering its psychological impact on teenagers. He is the engineer obsessed with the question, can we build it? Who never stops to ask, should we, and who is prepared to use it? His genius created the wings, but his arrogance, his negligence, created the tragedy. We have spoken on this channel before about another figure who gifted technology to mortals, the Titan, Prometheus. Prometheus, too, was an architect of human change. He stole fire from the gods, a revolutionary technology, and gave it to mankind. He, too, defied the established order. But the parallel ends there. Prometheus' act was one of strategic empowerment. He didn't just give humanity fire. The myths imply he taught them how to use it, how to keep it, how to build civilization with it. His act was a deliberate choice to uplift humanity, knowing the consequences to himself. He was a patron. Daedalus' act was one of desperation. He wasn't trying to uplift Icarus. He was trying to escape. His gift of flight was not a structure lesson. It was a necessary tool for his OWN freedom. Daedalus was not a patron. He was just a supplier. Prometheus accepted the consequences. Chained to a rock, his liver eaten by eagle, all to ensure humanity's future. Daedalus, in his haste and his ego, failed to see his son not as a passenger, but as a pilot. He gave Icarus the power of a god with the instruction manual of a toy. But what exactly did Icarus experience in that moment? If it wasn't hubris that pulled him toward the sun, what was it? The modern world has flattened the word hubris to simply mean arrogance or overconfidence. But to the ancient Greeks, hubris was a specific and terrible crime. It was not just pride. It was a violent, intentional arrogance, a specific act of defiance against the gods or against the natural order, born from a belief that you were better than them. Now, look at Icarus. Does this look like a boy intentionally defying the sun god Helios? Is he shaking his fist at Olympus? No, the text is clear. Ovid's Metamorphosis, one of the key tellings, says Icarus was drawn by a desire for the sky and that he rejoiced in his audacious flight. He wasn't driven by arrogance. He was driven by ecstasy. It was the sheer, overwhelming, physiological thrill of power. For the first time in his life, this boy, who had lived his entire life as a prisoner in a stone tower, was free. Not just free, but powerful. He was doing something no human had ever done. He was no longer a boy. He was a god. This is not a failure of character. It is a failure of physics, a failure of psychology. This is the same feeling as a teenager getting the keys to their first sports car. They don't intend to crash. They don't intend to defy the laws of the road. They just want to feel the acceleration. They are momentarily and totally blinded by the potential, and they forget the physics. Icarus is not a lesson in arrogance. He is a case study in inexperience. He is the tragic, universal symbol of unguided ambition. Let's be clear about these terms. Ambition is the desire to fly high. Inexperience is the inability to manage the altitude. Icarus did not suffer from hubris. He suffered from gravity. His desire to fly higher was not a sin. It was human. It was the same impulse that drives us to explore, to create, to innovate, to reach for something more. The story of Icarus is not a warning against that impulse. It is a warning about what happens when that impulse is not balanced by wisdom. He was a boy who felt the power of a god for a fleeting moment. He is not the villain of his own story. He's the victim, a victim of a power he was never trained to wield. Which leads us to the true hubris, the real arrogance at the heart of this myth. The story is about hubris, but it is not the hubris of Icarus. It is the hubris of Daedalus. This is the mentor's blind spot, and it is the central lesson of the myth. Daedalus, the genius, is guilty of the most common and most dangerous form of arrogance, the arrogance of the expert. His hubris manifests in three fatal ways. First is a hubris of the intellect. Daedalus believed his invention was so perfect, so brilliant, that it could overcome the flaws of the user. He put his faith in the technology, not the person. Second is the hubris of the mentor. Daedalus believed his words, a single, logical warning, were enough to replace experience. He thought a lecture could substitute for a lesson. He failed to account for the overwhelming, intoxicating feeling of flight. And third is the hubris of the father. He believed his son would listen rather than feel. He saw Icarus as an extension of himself, someone who would naturally share his own cautious engineering mindset. He failed to see him as an individual. This is the true hubris. Daedalus, the genius, made the mistake that brilliant people make every single day. He assumed that other people think like him. He assumed a logical warning could override an overwhelming emotional experience. It cannot. We see this tragedy play out in the modern world constantly. We see it in the startup founder, a technical genius like Daedalus, who promotes his best engineer to be a manager without giving them a single hour of leadership training. When the team collapses from low morale, the founder blames the new manager for not being a leader, when he was the one who handed them wings of responsibility without teaching them how to bear the weight. We see it in the leader who gives a brilliant, complex strategy to a junior team and is then shocked when they fail to execute. They blame the team for not getting it, when they are the ones who fail to translate strategy into capability. Daedalus is the patron saint of all accidental mentors, parents, bosses, and leaders who have the power to build wings, but who refuse to take responsibility for teaching flight. The myth of Icarus, then, is a 2,000-year-old warning, not for ambitious children, but for complacent mentors. So what is the hindsight lore we must take from this? What is a true lesson for an age obsessed with innovation, disruption, and flying high? For centuries, we have embraced the wrong lesson from this myth. The old flawed lesson is, know your place. Don't be too ambitious. Don't fly too high. It is a lesson of fear, a lesson of limitation. It is a lesson that insecure leaders and stagnant systems want you to believe. It is a lesson designed to keep you on the ground. The hindsight lore, the true lesson, is far more powerful. It is, know yourself, understand your tools, and never, ever give someone wings without teaching them how to handle the altitude. The failure of Icarus is a structural failure, not a moral one. Our modern culture is obsessed with Daedalus. We celebrate the inventor, we reward the disruptor. We pour billions of dollars into building wings, new technologies, new platforms, new forms of power, and simultaneously, we devalue the role of the mentor. We are a culture of self-made heroes. We want to fly now. We don't want to spend the time learning the boring, difficult physics of flight. We celebrate the young startup founder, the Icarus who flies high on venture capital. We give them money, power, and influence. And then, when their company crashes from a toxic culture, a lack of strategy, or simple inexperience, we blame them for their hubris. We fail them. We gave them wings of capital and code, but never taught them the wisdom of leadership.